Hey everyone, Mark and
Hey, everybody.
Sophia here. Welcome back to the Volunteer Matters podcast. Today we're talking about trusting your team. So this is inspired by a recent event that we ran into with a customer.
That,
And
that happens, and we're like, "Ooh, that should be a podcast episode."
yeah, and it's not like the first time we've seen it, but it's a good opportunity to talk about it. So, we know that as nonprofit leaders, you juggle a lot of things, you wear a lot of hats, and so it becomes difficult when you need to delegate and put responsibilities on other people. So, we're going to talk about when to do that, why it's so important, and yeah. So, I guess to share the story about this event. There was a customer that recently signed up with us, and they were having trouble with their volunteer management. They were looking for a good system, so they signed up. And it was the development officer and grant writer who kind of did the research on different platforms and are working closely with volunteers. So they chose to sign up and got started on the project with us. After one call, the executive director wanted to get involved, and she actually ended up saying, "You know what? I need to take this over." And yeah, it kind of put a halt on the whole project. Said, "You know what? I don't want to give them that responsibility anymore. I'm going to take this on myself." So
She took it over.
it really just put a yeah, she took it over, and I don't know exactly what went on in her head, but I sensed that she was nervous because she didn't have control over the situation completely. So that inspired this episode today.
Yeah, Sophia was we have these stand-ups where we just chit chat and see how things are going, and she helps me with these kinds of scenarios because I'm a little bit removed from it than I used to be maybe a few years back, and so I get wonderful insight from her on what's going on with our customers, what their needs are, what hurdles come up, and then we can try to figure out like how can we help people in those areas. And this is one where it's sort of like outside our realm of helping, but not in the podcast. So we've seen really, really successful teams and implementations happen with lightning speed. And we've seen sometimes when things can falter, like this one appears to have been, because this is kind of stalled for a little bit, which we'll get it back on track. But it sort of brought up this idea of leadership and micromanagement and and what that end up what that how that can end up impacting any sort of project. So first, to define what we are talking about, we're really talking about micromanagement. And this is a leader who over involves themselves in tasks that they probably shouldn't be involving themselves. And it's not a good thing. Obviously, when you say the word micromanagement, nobody has a good feeling when you say that, but that is what this is. Sometimes we feel like as leaders that we might be helping because we think we have the best way that we can approach in doing this, but in actuality, it hurts ourselves and our time management, and it hurts our staff too. So when you take tasks away from this from a team, morale drops, innovation is stifled, and quite honestly, a lot of the times the work suffers, the actual product suffers. As leaders, like if you're talking about like this executive director, I'm sure this person has a long history in nonprofits where they were working. Maybe they started out as a volunteer coordinator and moved into operations and did grant writing and did fundraising until they eventually got to the point where they were an executive director. And so they end up inserting themselves into situations that are actually the past versions of themselves. And the reality is that they're probably not that great at that job anymore. so so you've pulled this away from somebody who this is what they do every single day. And then rather than coaching them up and providing the strategic wisdom that you've gained through the years, you've actually sort of demoralized the staff and kind of saying to them, I don't think you're actually capable of doing this job. So the individual, they sort of get demoralized. You're now taking your time away from more strategic and mission oriented things, and you're involving yourself in something that you could be spending your time elsewhere.
Yeah, and the goal for any nonprofit, well, most is to scale and grow and to reach more people, make a bigger impact. So, like the key to doing that is trusting the people that you've chosen as leaders in your organization. So, like you're a leader building other leaders, So I would say trust is at the core of that. Um, like it's hard to let go of a project, but the message that you're communicating to your staff is that like I trust you, you got this, like no one's perfect, but you can go ahead and do your thing.
And sometimes it's not necessarily because I've fallen victim to this many times. I'm sure Sophia can pick to points where I've inserted myself and said, "Oh, I'll take care of it." And sometimes it's not just from a place of distrust or wanting to be controlling or micromanaging. Sometimes it's from a feeling like you want to be helpful, like you feel like you may have this special sauce that you can put into this thing that will assure that it's successful. But at its basis, it really does start to say, well, do you trust these staff people to do this? And unless the answer is, if the answer is no, I don't, then you have an entirely different
That's a
problem.
separate problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that means you didn't hire the right person. That means that this person has to be moved into a different position or moved out of the organization entirely. But if the answer is, I trust this person, then you're actually not being helpful by inserting yourself in to do a part of their job. Let them do their job. That's why they're there, right? So um, there's this expression too, like let's assume that the head leadership, the CEO, the executive director, the CDO, the CFO, right, all the C-level people. Let's assume that they can do everything in the organization better than anyone else in the organization. That's how amazing they are, right? So anything they do is going to be just spectacular. Um, but the problem is obviously they can't do everything. So even if what ends up happening is everything gets into a bottleneck and then nothing gets done. And so there's an expression that we have this group that we work with, and one of the mentors in that group uses this expression where he says 80% of the way done is 100% awesome. What that basically is saying is if you have somebody on your team that can do the job 80% as well as you can, that's awesome because it means it'll get done. And what happens is when we keep taking things and hoarding stuff, it doesn't get done. That's not awesome, right? So in this instance, they actually obviously trusted them to go out and do the research, to identify what their business problems were, what solutions they needed to find the best solution, to contract for that solution, to allocate the budget for that solution. So there's obvious trust here. They trusted them with spending money, which is a pretty high level of trust. Um, and then when it came time for implementation, all of a sudden, for some reason, that trust evaporated. But I'll emphasize just one other point before we move on is sometimes I think in this case, because I went back and I listened to a portion of the recording that Sophia shared with me because I was really curious about it. Sometimes the issue is because that leader is having actually a hard time wrapping their heads around the actual problem and the best way to solve it. But the reason why they're having a hard time wrapping their heads around that is because they're farther from the problem than their staff is. Their staff is actually at ground level of the problem. Like they understand the problem better than the person that's, a step or two above them. And therefore, they actually are the better person in this case. So I say 80% done is 100% awesome. And the reality is that the closer you are to the problem, if you have good people and you trust them, they're probably even more capable of implementing the solution properly. And again, even if they don't do it to 100%, let them do it to 80%. Then come in and add your secret sauce and have them get from 80 to 100.
Yeah, and that's why like the very first episode we did was on how to build a dream volunteer team. So we talk about all the different roles that you should ideally have on your volunteerism team, and the strategic role is really important. So like if you're an executive director caught up in the details of something like this, you kind of lose sight of the strategic role, and like it goes both ways. You
Yep.
have to bring different perspectives into it.
Yeah, bring the different perspectives and allow them to do their job. So when we talk about that team, there's like people from all different parts of the organization, especially if you're larger. Development and fundraising should be involved. Marketing should be involved. If you're a membership organization, people from membership should be involved. HR should be involved. Obviously, the strategic part of it should be involved. And all of those things should be considered, and each member should be respecting the other people's core capabilities and experience. So, but you do have to make sure that you have the right people in place. So you have to hire the right people. You have to set clear expectations from a leadership standpoint as to what you expect out of whatever project it is they're working on. And then you have to give them the right room and resources and support to get their jobs done. This way, those individuals now, they're, what's a word I'm looking for? They're empowered, right? They have, they believe that they were hired for a purpose and that they're the right person for that purpose. They understand their clear expectations, what we're expecting out of them. They've been given the right resources and support. And now they have a sense of ownership over this thing. It's their baby. And when people feel a sense of ownership over something, they're going to be much more likely to do a good job at it and not default or defer to someone else. The tricky part in teams are when you pull away something from somebody, they now no longer feel it's their responsibility. And so now nobody's responsible for it. Nobody's handling it. So just make sure that we're keeping on top of all those elements.
All right. So, I guess before we wrap up here, just ask yourself if there are any tasks that you are doing now that could be delegated. So that's a good place to start if you feel that you might be overstepping. Um, and are there any projects that are stalled because of your involvement? Do you have too much on your plate? And what on your plate could be put onto someone else? Um, so yeah.
Yeah, constantly asking yourself the question, am I the only person that can do this? Literally, am I the only person that can do this? Not am I the best person? Is this the like, if I am not as a leader in any capacity, if you have people under you that can do that thing, not that like you say, can they do it 80% as well as I can? Can they do it 75% as well as I can? Then you should be delegating that. It's really the higher and higher you get up, the more and more it should be very strategic, very mission oriented, you're delegating things to teams and you're giving them the vision, the mission, and the tools and resources to get the job done. And then you're holding them accountable to that. You're not actually doing the work. I'll put air quotes around that because obviously everything else I'm talking about is work.
Yeah.
And then if you start seeing things stall, you should be asking yourself, am I the reason that's stalling? And if so, again, better to get it out of your hands and let somebody else fail, right? And then come back to it. Or what will more than likely happen is you delegate it to somebody and they were successful, even if only 80% as successful as you might have been. And then you can help coach them up to get it to be 100%. And it just inspires greater confidence and joy in people's work.
Yeah, and this is not just a problem with nonprofit leadership. This is like a business problem, and
Totally.
problem probably like I don't know in a personal sense too. So
Yeah,
yeah, do
probably. I know that for me, like I have a really hard time letting go of stuff. And Sophia can attest to this. I'm not looking at your camera, but are you nodding your head right now, Sophia?
yeah, it happens, but
And I have to stop myself. And I am, I look at things all the time and I actually get excited by these things and want to do them because I go, oh, here's a problem. Let's fix it. Let's fix it together, and I all the time I actually say to myself, I've said this to Sophia many times, she can confirm this. You're better equipped to answer this or handle this than I am. You're in this every single day. And even though I've been doing this for 21 years and Sophia has been doing it for 3.5,
three and a half, four. I
three
lost
and a
track.
half, four, um, she's far better equipped when it comes to consulting with organizations to understand what their requirements are for their volunteer programs and implementing systems in order to make those things more efficient or automate them. She's far better qualified. And that's awesome. That means that we have cultivated a resource internally that has eclipsed my ability after 21 years in the space. And it's only because I hopefully have moved on to bigger, more strategic things so that we can help more and more organizations. And if I stayed doing, constantly interrupting Sophia and doing her job for her, where would we be as an organization? And for me, that's as a company. But when you really start thinking about mission and our customers, now you're talking about like really you're impeding your ability to help more, to solve these big problems that we as a broader community and society need your organizations to solve. So you can look at it that way. If I can get out of my own way and I can have my good people do that work on behalf of the organization, then all of these big goals and big dreams we have to eradicate, poverty and homelessness and, fund medical research and save animals and, and heal the sick, those are the bigger things that we need to be focused on. So get out of your own way. Don't micromanage. Allow good people to do their work. Allow them the opportunity to fail, and they'll probably surprise you every time and do something pretty awesome.
Awesome. All right. Anything else?
Oh, I
Anything
think
to
that pretty much wrapped it up.
Love this episode. So make sure subscribe and hit the notification bell because we release episodes every 2 weeks. So yeah, if you found this valuable, please share with someone in your organization or at another organization to share the message. But thanks so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.